So for somebody that's already done quite a bit of therapy or personal development, tested a whole bunch of different modalities, could you explain to them what parts work, what IFS actually is, what it
Mm.
kind of offers that maybe the other modalities don't?
There's lots of different modalities of parts work, and IFS is one, and I believe the most kind of juicy and sophisticated. But just to say that it really sits on the back of Jungian archetypes or voice dialogue, Gestalt. There was lots of other therapy models that were talking about this. So just to say, IFS didn't come up with this, but it's just a really beautiful way of seeing it. The difference that it would feel like in the room compared to talk therapy is around who are you talking to. So in general talk therapy, if you were the client, come to see me as the therapist, we're having a conversation and I might be asking questions to kind of elicit different realizations or providing strategies to support you to see things differently, understand what you've been through. In parts work, in IFS, I, as the therapist, am supporting you to talk to your
Mm.
parts. So it's about building an inner relationship, not an outer relationship, kind of reparenting the little ones inside.
Mm.
And so, what we mean by parts is um, different adaptations, different roles that have been taken on that in IFS we personify, we really see as kind of inner people. So an example might be, and as I sit with you, I've got, kind of the therapist part, like wanting to like say the right thing and try and be articulate. There's a subtle kind of inner critic hanging out, going like, "Oh my gosh, Paige is so gorgeous and amazingly put together," and like, "Oh my god, how am I coming across on the video?" All these little voices have holding different pieces in the background or in the periphery of my awareness, and they are all, according to IFS, trying to help us in some way, either avoid pain, help us not look stupid. Yeah, they have all different kind of jobs. Their impact can create a lot of damage in the world, though. So they
Mm.
have good intentions, but they're not always successful. So we try and just make friends with them. I often say to clients, it's like, especially things like inner critic or, parts that can be quite nasty or sabotage our life, don't let us connect with people or use, substances and things that, get in the way of living a good life. The sort of intuition is to push them away. They're bad, they're unhelpful, they're ruining my life. We hate them, get rid of them. But I often say it's like if you're at the pub and there was a really kind of difficult person, if you kind of go up to them and be like, "Piss off, mate, you're not welcome here," you're just going to start a fight.
Mm.
But if you sit them down and just be like, "What's going on, buddy? Like, let's buy your beer, have a chat. I think you've had enough now. Let's, I see what you've been trying to do and make friends."
Taxi.
You could create more, yeah, you could create more space. So IFS is different than some parts models in that it talks about self energy, you that isn't a part. And it's one of those things that is difficult to talk about. It's similar to that nature of consciousness question. It's often more to be experienced. But one simple way is just the you that's here when there's no problems to solve.
Mm.
Who you really are at the core when there's no parts of you trying to manage or do something or affect something. Mm.
Mm. Okay, there's so much there that I want to go into. So, first of all, you mentioned at the beginning of your answer to that question that there was a therapist part, which I thought was really interesting because when I think about parts, and I haven't done um, any deep IFS work with a practitioner, just my own research. But when I think about parts, I think about parts that have been catalyzed when we were children, like that there are all these parts within us, but they're all younger parts. But so when you said that there's a
Mhm.
therapist part, it got me interested in the idea of perhaps us like developing, like the multiplicity of us just develops over time, and that you don't
Mhm.
wrangle all of your little ones, like all of your childhood parts, and then no more parts come online, because surely
Mm.
your therapist part is not a child part, or I don't know, maybe it is. But yeah, what's your perspective on that, on like the parts that the parts just keep multiplying?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Our inner children often, some of them are just free and living their best life without any burdens. But many of our younger parts have been exiled away, holding a lot of pain so that we don't have to feel it again. We kind of put them in the metaphorical basement and shut the door. So when difficult things happen, as they do in everyone's childhood, even if you've had a quote unquote perfect childhood, there's going to be stuff that was too overwhelming to really process at the time. So we kind of get rid of it, shut the door, and parts that are also young, because these things happen when we're little, take on roles. So perhaps, an obvious example might be I keep getting in trouble when I'm little from a parent. And so I squash that one away that feels like I'm no good, I'm not good enough, I'm stupid. And I create a perfectionist part that just tries really, really hard. So mommy and daddy give me the love and support that I need. And I never have to feel the pain of that little one who had that experience of feeling stupid. And so the managers, the ones that keep the door shut, they grow up with us and they get a bit more sophisticated, but they're developmentally quite young still a lot of the time. So, I have, lots of therapist parts, I guess, that help me in the therapy room. I've got a timekeeping part that's like, we're going to have too much time, we're going to have not enough time. And it's just quite good at really keeping track there. I have parts that are really aware of power dynamics. I call her Justine. She's kind of one of my more feminist parts. And so she'll be like kind of nudging me like, oh, something's a bit off there in terms of maybe power and control issues with a couple that I'm working with or something. I have Sadie, who's, really nurturing and is really good at creating rapport. And so ideally, I want them all there as advisors, but I want them to let me be in the seat. And so the practice of an IFS therapist is much about, we call it unblending, parts making room for us to really be there with the client, rather than Justine kind of jumping in, being like, well, when you say, you're in a heterosexual relationship, your male partner never does the dishes, start having a go at him or something. No, that's not ideal. But she could provide that information to me. And then I could really speak that from the heart.
Kind of like they become your counsel, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, for example, the development of parts, it's interesting. Justine, she probably like had a little bit of a voice, but I was much more, probably a bit more people pleasing. I wouldn't be very assertive or speak kind of truth to power. So she's evolved to become much more a boss, but it's kind of the same part, but she's evolved with me as I've kind of grown up and become a therapist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is so juicy. I can feel, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it on for size. I can feel that there's a part of me that really just wants to rush to the thing that I deeply want to talk to you about, which is the nature of consciousness and what perhaps this modality of therapy can teach us about it, or what it points to in terms of, like what our identities are. But we'll get there. That part of me is the rushing part. First of all, I'm curious to know, your parts, are they auditory? Do you hear them as voices, or do you get flashes of what is Justine? How does Justine communicate with you in a tactile sense?
Because I have done therapy work where I have been like, okay, is there an image that goes with it? I can kind of see her. And so I can kind of get the feeling tone when I just start to feel a little bit arced up, like, right. Oh yeah, that's Justine. She's very good at writing angry emails. So I'll often know she's around because I just, I'm like, dear so-and-so, when this happened, rah, 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 and like on loop. And I'm like, thanks, Justine, I've got it, babe. So there's a somatic kind of imprint of the different ones. And some of them I know better than others. Yeah, there's a group that I know really well and I can sort of feel in my body, and then I have an image of them. So there's a little one called Cozy Blue, one of my exiles, and just her little cozy blue dressing gown that I had when I was a little kid, so I can kind of see her like that. And so I really kind of see her and feel her. somatically, she's the one that just wants to stay home in bed and finds the world just a little overwhelming and itchy and scary and loud and things. So yeah, that they show up, I guess, initially somatically, and the ones that I've worked with and know, then I've got an image of because I've sort of um, just sensed into what do they look like and been shown
Mm.
that. Yeah.
It's so
Mm.
interesting when I hear you talk about this, especially because you've named your parts. This theory kind of comes to mind that parts kind of exist on a continuum, and at the very far end of that continuum is something like dissociative identity disorder. Um, and I wonder, like, IFS is it? It's not describing something that's like categorically different from dissociative identity disorder in all of us, but it's just a less extreme expression of the same phenomenon. Um, is that a fair way to think about this?
Yeah, I think you're really close in terms of, and I'm not necessarily an expert on dissociative disorders, and there are people out there that are IFS therapists who are, but my understanding would be that yes, we all have parts. This is a natural human phenomenon throughout all cultures and ages and times. It's just how humans show up. And people with dissociative disorders also have parts, but they don't. There's a dissociative wall between the parts, so they don't sort of know about each other, or
Mm.
a sense of self energy, like this is sort of me without the parts, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Whereas,
yeah.
if I've got Justine talking to me about like, oh, this couple in front of you, maybe there's some power issues going on here, like I haven't sort of become Justine and forgotten that I'm Ella. It's yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the self.
Mm.
What is the self? Who is the me? Who is the I?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question.
Mm.
Dick Schwartz, who created IFS, talked about the qualities that you'd notice in yourself when you are unblended enough from parts to have enough self energy. So he likes, those like all it's 8 C's or 5 P's of self energy of the therapist, but you'll start to feel things like compassion, clarity, curiosity, creativity, um, these sort of energetic tone of your experience. The parts are the ones that have things to say ultimately. When we have enough self energy on board, we can speak with that. But I think it's still the parts, really. Like that's what makes us human. That gives
Mm.
us a voice and language and all the doing of the world. The self is just really the beingness, the life energy behind everything else.
Do you think that humans are the only animal with parts?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah. I think animals have parts. Certainly dogs, dolphins, you can see them, there might be a playful part or a guilty part of a dog. I'm sure you've seen those
Mm.
videos with the dogs that you can tell, like, if there's two, like, which one did the naughty thing.
Mm.
That's obviously a part. As we keep sort of going into, I don't know, vertebrates and things, who knows? But
Mm. Hmm.
are they
Um,
just purely kind of just you know, in a primal, get the food, have sex. Yeah, is there any parts going on? I don't know. Mm.
yeah, hard to know. I think it's a question that even science uh, can't answer.
Do they
Um,
have a sense of me as a thing, or is it just an experience?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like a lot of the thinkers, the consciousness explorers and philosophers have pointed to this thing that it's like something to be something,
Mm.
and through the lens of IFS, it's like something to be Ella, or it's like something to be Paige, and that something is like a multiplicity of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like lots of voices going on at the same time. But it just it this I want to kind of like unpack more deeply the delineation between the parts that are talking and then the person or the self or the soul, I don't know what the name
Mm.
is, that's receiving that chatter. And like I'm
Yeah.
just curious, and maybe you can speak through your own experience working with these parts, is like what is the Ella that is not any of these things, like guilty, shameful, agitated, typing an angry email, uh, feeling like the world is too overwhelming? What is that?
There's sort of two pieces to it. So, and Dick Schwartz talks about it as in like wave and particle. That, you know, when we go deep into like meditative states or psychedelic states, that experience of just being one with everything is self energy. That's you. Um, Rupert Spira asked the question, like, just ask yourself, like, am I aware? And there's a voice that can say yes, but then there's just something even more, you know, behind that, or prior to that, which is just the sense of I exist, right? Like there's a knowing that we're alive. And so there's the aliveness and then the knowing of it. So there's sort of the bigger self and then myself that knows or something. It's this sort of subtle differentiation. So like self energy could say just exists as life. You could say it's just the energy of the life force. And my bit of it is kind of filtered through my parts. And so me, like in a lot of self energy, will look different to you in a lot of self energy, potentially, because it's coming through a different transmitter.
Yeah, I know that these states are like super difficult to describe, Ella.
Yeah.
So thank you so much
Having a
for
go.
having a go at it, obliging me. Do you think it's the case that most people haven't experienced this experience of pure self?
I'm real. I always see the world in quite a optimistic way, but I would like to think that everyone has had little glimpses, maybe not really known that that's what it was. You know, the flow states that we talk about when you're just, there's no real thinking, there's no deciding, you're just in a moment, whether that's some form of movement or sport or creative endeavor. You know, moments during a sexual encounter where you just let go of everything kind of known and you're just with an experience, you know, just yourself, right? Nature as well, or experiences where you just stop being you in a way and just are open to the wonder of like a beautiful sunset.
It's really sounding to me just like a state that is only accessible with some level of like relaxation.
And that's another really great question. Because they do say like one of the qualities is calm, but what about during like ecstatic dance or, you know, these tribal kind of experiences where people would go into ecstasy?
True. Or
Yeah.
rigorous lovemaking.
Yeah, right. So not necessarily relaxation in terms of, you know, what you typically see as, you know, the Buddhist monk sort of sitting down and really just being just in pure self. I think there could be a lot of movement going on, but there's not the agitation. There's not a trying or doing this. The music's sort of going through me and I'm just at one with myself and everything at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess just like as an example, let's just say we're here and we're having this conversation and I'm feeling like there's multiple different things going on, like, you know, similar to you in the therapy room. I'm thinking about time. I'm thinking about, I want to be present with what you're saying, but I'm also thinking about, I want to make sure that I have something to come in with when you stop speaking. And I'm also thinking about, you know, like, how do I take this in the direction that I want it to go? And then there's also another part that's like, well, you know, maybe this just needs to go, this chat just needs to go wherever it needs to go. Like, if I'm in and I am in that scenario right now with all of these different pieces to me that have all of these different goals, what is the technique? What is the technique to then work with them and make, and we'll continue to use this interview as an example, but like for me to kind of settle the crew and then make sure that the interview is coming from that self, that source, that like eros even.
Yes. So it's this term blended or unblended. So when parts fully take over us, well, so we're blended with a part. Like if you start to get like all like intense about like asking the right question and you know, saying the most clever thing that you can possibly think of, you could probably feel that. Your listeners could probably pick that up, like, oh, this is a bit intense, you know. But you don't want to totally let that part go. So it's just to have them, like you said, like settle the crew, have them as contributors and allies that are supporting you, but not be overcome by one of the parts. That there's just enough of your heart or just you here, as well as the team working hard in their own ways uh, to support you. So we'd call it unblending enough to have enough self energy.
Yeah, I think if I was going to take this into a different context, like perhaps a conflict with a loved one,
Mm.
you know, because it's one thing to be doing your job that you're choosing to do and trying to get it right. That's a certain flavor of that can bring about a certain flavor of overwhelm. But then when you're in a intimate situation where you know intimacy is being threatened, the overwhelm is like a different flavor, it's a different tone. And for, at least for me in those scenarios, those the parts or the voices or you know the amount of stuff that's going on behind the scenes is really loud and really strong. I'm interested to know, like, in those moments, if you're with somebody else but you're kind of like also with this whole family, this whole internal family that is your own bits and pieces, how are you supposed to navigate the amount of stimulus?
Yeah, it's intense. And in that scenario, what has happened is one of our little ones has been knocked, has been wounded. So, you know, we'll all have some kind of variation of I'm unlovable, or I'm going to be abandoned, or I'm invisible, or I'm not important, or I don't matter. Like no one really gets to adulthood without a little bit of a flavor of something like that. I'm unsafe,
Mm.
whatever it might be. And that's what they call the exiles, the inner children that are usually holding that belief about themselves. When your partner does a look or forgets your birthday or does something like that, we immediately, oh, it's true, there's some evidence. That little one kind of tugs at us and says, ouch, help. And so the protective parts quickly close the door, the basement door, put that away and start having a go at our partner. How dare you say that to me? Or, you know, getting really defensive, or we might go into like a
Mm.
big crying meltdown, and you know we show up in a very different way. Those
Mm-hmm.
parts are just trying to protect against the hurt. They don't actually care about the relationship. They just want to kind of
Mm.
win or make sure we don't experience any more hurt of the little parts. So what do you
Mm.
do? This is the deep and tricky work, and relationships are the best way to kind of get to the gold there.
Do it, yeah.
Is, you know, ideally, like maybe I'll use an example from my own life. My partner and I were gonna, I can't remember, we're going to be buying presents for each other for something. And so I'd like researched and got him something really lovely and kind of hidden it somewhere. And he was like cleaning out the cupboard and found it and was like, what was this? And I was like, oh, it's your present for like next week, whatever the thing was, Easter or Valentine's or something. And he'd totally forgot it. And I immediately felt like, because I'd gone into a lot of effort, I immediately felt this little young part that was just like so hurt and just had all these feelings of doesn't even love me and like all this sort of stuff. And so my protector in that way, this protector has a more avoidant. So I would sort of just went into this like cold, fuck you, sort of I don't need anyone sort of
Mm.
sense. And I had to really take a moment just to go and be with inside, you know, he's still in front of me there having this sort of experience, but just be with that little one and just really tend to her and say this, you know, do that self-parenting. Like, I'm here, feel me, you matter. You know, this is an external situation that I can speak to him from my heart about and say, yeah, I'm disappointed. But first of all, settle my little one inside so that um, manager part doesn't have to kind of freeze me and start being horrible to him.
Mm.
Does that sort of explain how it might happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like I think this is again really nuanced territory, and it
Mm.
is way more experiential than it is
Oh.
cognitive. But something that just came through for me then, like when I reflect on altercations that have happened between my partner and I, and often I find that there is this part of me, right? This part of me that is really afraid of surrendering. And when you mentioned before that those manager parts, they actually just want to protect you from the hurt. They don't want, they don't have a preference for whether or not the relationship survives. They're just looking
Mm.
after the exile.
Exactly.
That kind of, yeah, something just clicked into place for me then, because with this surrender thing is like I often feel in my relationship when we're having a conflict about something, in order to resolve the conflict, I'm going to have to let go of my truth. And that's kind of, at some point I've conflated the idea of surrender with that. Surrender is just going, okay, yes, you're right, whatever, I'm
Mm.
wrong, and letting go of what feels true and real for me. And
Mm.
so there's obviously a part in there that doesn't want to do that, and that part is the one that keeps fighting and build, I guess, like turns the dial up on the temperature, which is not in favor of the relationship, which is not in
Yeah.
favor of the connection, and is certainly not me. Doesn't look like from the outside I'm working as a member of a team.
Mm.
So yeah, something that's just kind of like something that came to mind as you were talking about your experience in relationship with these parts that, yeah, get really loud. And I'm reflecting and thinking, like, how would I in that moment just take a second to be with my partner whilst also being with the part of me inside that
Mm.
doesn't want to give up,
Yeah.
her version of events.
Yes. Yeah. And that will most likely be a strategy that um, was learned, because y- for some reason you had to do that, or, there was a repercussion for little you at some
Mm.
point. Yeah. That what's the fear of the part that you'll um, lose your truth. You won't have a
Mm.
voice. So I won't sort of, psychoanalyze or guess too much. It's sort of your work still with the therapist, but doing some work to help them so that that little one can actually really learn that their voice is important, their truth matters, so that they're not holding those burdens. So when your partner has another version of the events that happened, this manager part doesn't need to feel like they have to surrender or never give up, because they're not trying to protect that wound anymore.
Hi, sorry to interrupt this incredibly interesting conversation, but I do have something important to tell you. I have a Substack, and I would love you to come on over and be a part of my community on there. My Substack is the place where I publish all the things that don't make it into the podcast. It's where I unpack my research process, how I meet my guests, what it's like when I meet them. It's kind of like a if you know sort of space. So if that sounds interesting to you, then drop on down to the show notes. There's a link there. Click on it. It's free, and it also gives you access to me. So if you have questions for me, then that is the way that I would love to hear from you. Okay, that's all. Back to the conversation. Because it is interesting in relationships where you said, like, doing the work in relationship is where the really deep stuff can happen. And often I think that that's because both people have different ideas about what has happened, and you
Mm.
can end up creating a conflict about a conflict. So you're not,
Mm.
you never get to the point where you're resolving the conflict, because you're just resolving the conflict that's happened over not being able to resolve the conflict. And
Yeah.
it all comes down to, like, both people having two different realities, which is also a big part of why I'm so interested in now, like, the nature of reality and
Mm.
consciousness. When we think about, like, two people have different versions of reality, and there is supposed to be some sort of base reality, but, like, neither of us are able to tap in to that if we're truly honest with ourselves. Like, we are both seeing things through the lens of our experiences and our parts. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the question is here, but that's just like, yeah, thinking or hearing more, learning more about IFS's
Mm.
lens on life. It's made me think about, yeah, it's really made me question, like, how does this change, like, how we view reality, or like how we're able to be more compassionate, I suppose, towards
Mm.
ourselves for seeing reality through the eyes of so many different parts.
Yeah,
Is that making sense? Like, what I'm pointing to?
it really is. And I see it in my counseling room like every day that couples have such a different experience of the argument, and then they argue about the argument, but I remind them that when exiles have been triggered, when we feel pain and we've gone into kind of protective mechanisms, we're not actually encoding memory in the usual way anymore.
Mm.
It's not actually being captured in a way that anyone could remember it correctly. So it's a really pointless endeavor, and to actually try and get underneath. They call it the U-turn in IFS, rather than pointing at the partner about what you did wrong, really coming back to yourself and sharing what happened for you. And there's this little term, speaking for parts, not from parts. So, you know, from a part might just be like, I'm never going to surrender. I'm not going to, you know, try and admit that your version of reality is correct. How dare you ask me to? Talking for a part would be like, I'm just noticing I've got a real strong sense of not giving up and wanting to really kind of pick apart what you've said the version of reality is, because I don't want to, you know, feel like my truth doesn't matter. And when you speak for a part in that way, you usually get a more compassionate response, because you're not coming with all that angry energy, but you're speaking for it still, so it does have a voice.
Yeah. It's interesting because in that way you are being the passive observer, and you're observing what everybody's doing, and then you're kind of communicating that to whoever's in front of you in the midst of this rupture. But then there's also the self, which kind of puts at odds this idea of there being a passive observer. Like most spiritual traditions have a passive observer, but in IFS there's kind of like this self that is actually a whole other thing. I don't know if I'm like getting us really confused here, and like we're kind of like deep in the weeds of all of this, but that is an interesting like point of tension for me, of trying to understand like, okay, there is an observer, but the observer isn't passive, I suppose. Like the observer is another thing.
Yeah, and an observer could be a part as well,
Okay.
potentially. But, you know, self does just is kind of the beingness who is just noticing without kind of getting all upset about anything, but isn't just totally passive, like does still want healing, have an intention to go towards, you know, what is loving or homeostasis. So it's not just this pure like nirvana, void, nothingness. It is rich with love, and I'm sure nirvana is, you know, experienced as rich with love as well. But it's not this sort of unknown, passive, just pure awareness. It's all talking about the same thing. IFS isn't sort of taking this new thing as self. It's bringing a lot of spirituality into modern therapy rooms. It's talking about the same thing as the Indian sages and the Buddhists and the Christian mystics talked about, but it's not using any language that belongs to any certain tradition. So it doesn't matter what you kind of believe or faith or no faith that you have, you can apply it. So I don't think it's anything different. But the question about, is the observer self? Well, is there kind of a me taking notes? That's going to be a part. Or is, you know, just the kind of me that's just in that, just here, because it's just who I am. I can't get away from it. There's an observing there in a way, but not in a doing. Oh my gosh, it's hard to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah. I kind of get it. There's I'm thinking like, there's a hierarchy. There's like would that be fair to say that there's in parts work that there is some sort of hierarchy between the roles?
We want to kind of be careful of that, because there can be a sort of tendency to be like, parts bad, self good. You know, that's not very useful. Like the parts are full of self energy. They couldn't exist unless they had, you know, the life force, right? And we often think about parts like you listed before, guilty or self-critical, but, also the part of me that, could pick up the phone and call a friend and be there in a lovely way. There's probably lots of self-energy in that, but there's also like the good friend part, that better call them. So we need our parts to be able to do anything in life.
Mm.
And so I wouldn't say there's a hierarchy. It's just parts that have jobs for us, parts that hold the pain, and there's who we really are.
Mhm, mhm. So what about physical symptoms?
Mm,
Can physical symptoms be a part? Have you seen that in your work with IFS?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But not always. We wouldn't assume. So, the body, let's say something really just purely physical, like I broke my knee or something, right? Like that's not a part. That's like because I hit the ground or whatever. But I'm going to have parts around that. So I might have a part that um, prolongs the healing because I really need a rest, or I'm getting lots of love and attention through that injury. And so this part's like, using the body to like keep the inflammation going. They can do that. It's quite incredible what parts can actually do and use the body for. Uh, or I might have parts in response to that. So I might have a part just feeling so um, victimized, like, oh, why does everything go wrong for me? And I might have a lot of parts up around a physical sensation. So there's a plethora of ways that parts can use the body or respond to the body. But sometimes a break or an illness or a disease is just a physiological thing, so we wouldn't assume that it's all going to be a part.
Hmm. But in the cases that it is a part and you have a part that is keeping inflammation up because it wants a rest, how does that work? Like from a biological uh, standpoint, like how do we know that it is a part?
Well, once we start to do the process, we can just ask, and you can just start to really get curious, and they will tell you, what are, are you doing that? Is that what do you know about that? And the parts will tell you. They generally don't lie. Like if you ask them, sort of,
Mm.
they will tell you. One of the there's not a lot of peer reviewed research on IFS yet. Hopefully they'll continue to be more and more, but one of them was on rheumatoid arthritis, and many of the participants had really good outcomes from IFS, that there was parts using the body in this way. So how they do it or how it works, I'm not really able to answer you, but I know that it happens. Yeah.
Mm. Is there a lot of self-trust that has to go into working with parts? I think when you said before, you can just ask the parts.
Mm.
What came up for me was like, yeah, I could ask the parts, but how would I trust that it wasn't just my imagination,
Mm.
or my desire speaking? Like, for example, with a physical injury, my desire, because of what I believe about the way the world works, like my desire would be like, yeah, if I have some sort of internal thing going on, like if I have a pain in my body that is somewhat inexplicable, it would be my preference that that was something emotional, because
Yeah.
then I could work with it. But then is that just me wanting to have control? And so if I was
Well,
to ask, like, oh, is this sensation in my pelvis or in my lower back, is this a part? And I got the answer, yes, it's a part. There would be another part, I suppose, that would come in and be like, oh no, that you're just wanting that to be the case. That's not actually the
mm.
case. How do you work through that?
It's a very self-correcting process. So if we were working with, I think you said back pain or something, we'll just like focus there, see what you notice, and are there sensations, thoughts, start to really see if we can get a sense of a part there, or is it just a sensation? And then how do you feel towards it? Oh, I hate it. I want it to go away. So then we turn the spotlight away from kind of the lower back to the one that hates it. And we do work there. We understand it's good intentions. I mean, it makes sense that you would hate something painful, wants you to get away from that, but fighting internally often keeps you tense and stuck and doesn't change anything. So making friends with that one, and maybe then we would hear from whether it was that part or the other part. You said really wanting to have a preference of, yeah, this is a part just doing that for some reason, and if we can understand that, it can stop doing that. And I went, I'll be pain free, and that makes a lot of sense. So then we would spotlight that one, speak more about that preference. Is that part holding a lot of grief that certain things aren't available in your life because of that pain, and helping that part unblend? How do you, until you really get the question is, how do you feel towards that part? And we keep unblending until we get an answer. No, I really understand it. Something like, I really understand it, or I have a lot of compassion for what it's trying to do. I could really see it in a different way now. I feel really sad for it. It's just, really longing to be pain free. Could it make some room so you could be with the pain? If you get no, there's another part, or we need to work more with that concerned part. So it just sorts itself out, because we just keep turning to whoever's got the concerns until we can just be with the target.
If someone was wanting to like undergo therapy using the modality of IFS, like what is a realistic expectation they can have for how long this work takes? Like it sounds like there's often a lot of people to get through, sub people to get through.
When we do the trainings, it's all other therapists, but they have demos, and there's a lot of just energy, like there's 40 people in the room or on the Zoom, and one of the lead trainers and a therapist acting as the client. So it's kind of a potent atmosphere, but incredible work can be done in just an hour with somebody. Yeah. So how long's a bit of string? I mean, I'm obviously really passionate about it. I just do monthly therapy because there's always a part that needs some help. Yeah, it depends what someone is up for. I've got a few clients that I've been working with for years, and are having really different experiences in their life through getting to know their parts and building that relationship. But it's certainly not a quick fix for people that are coming with lots of childhood trauma.
Yeah. You have mentioned, I've heard you mention in your podcast, The Parts Party, that the parts work can actually be quite psychedelic. Which I'm interested to hear more about, like psychedelic without using any psychedelic medicines or substances. Maybe you can share what you mean by that with an example of your own experience.
I have to try and think of one of my really trippy kind of sessions, but when we get to know the parts and we start to see, oh, they're not just trying to be an asshole and ruin my life. They're doing that for a reason. Get that compassion and really start to hear their story. The stuff that they show us this is where it can start to just be really psychedelic. Like I've experienced ayahuasca quite a few times, and it's sort of, just different memories or visions are just kind of coming through, like stuff you sort of, without that medicine, couldn't really just make up. Right. So in the insight experience of IFS, I'm really with a part with a lot of self. They might show me a memory, and they'd kind of bring in different imagery or different experiences, making kind of links or just showing me things that it's kind of like being in a dream is how I feel, where things are kind of just flowing and happening. And when there's a lot of self energy, that's a parallel to the psychedelic work of, just when your heart opens and you can kind of just feel like the wonder of the universe. There's this just like beauty that can be present when our parts unblend. There we are, and that's the experience that's there.
What about if you were going to actually pair this work with psychedelic medicine? Is that something that happens? Is that something that's advisable? If you are somebody that works with parts with a therapist and then you go off and have a psychedelic experience, perhaps in a ceremony or whatever, like are these parts, once you're familiar with them, are they going to start coming? Are they going to make themselves known?
What is often noted in psychedelic work is that this spontaneously happens for people. People will just start to talk about a part of me this, or I notice this part of me, or this young part of me. So it can happen really organically. We want to be, however, really cautious and careful about suggestibility when
Mm.
people take psychedelic medicines. We don't want to add anything in. So during that dosed session, we are just there to guide and support whatever comes through. Prior and after, doing IFS is a fantastic way to be supported through it. I've done integration with people. There might be parts that are terrified. There might be parts really eager for a certain outcome and really want to get, the most healing possible. There might be parts that really scared to let go. People can take a large amount of a psychedelic medicine and nothing much happens if their manager parts are kind of gripping on for dear life to the reality that they know. So getting the consent of all parts in the system can be really helpful. My sense of what happens during psychedelics is it just all the manager parts with all their jobs just relax, and they tend to be okay about that for whatever reason. So it enables us to go to the depth of where the pain is or where the healing is needed, or have an experience of self, which wasn't possible before because of all these manager parts just working really hard to kind of protect and control and do, and that there is healing in that. So
Yeah, I get this sense that there's some relationship there between your psyche overriding your biology and basically putting you in a position where you've just drank or eaten or taken a whole bunch of medicine and you having no psychedelic experience at all. You're just like completely sober. And then also what we were talking about earlier, where you can have a part that's prolonging inflammation in order to get its needs met in some way. And like I know that there is a fair bit of research around the psychosomatic connection, but yeah, for me there's like something really juicy and mysterious about that, about how our beliefs, or maybe not our beliefs, but like our beliefs about what we need in order to stay safe can inform and influence our biology in like a really real way.
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit more about, actually, no, I want to stay on psychedelics for a little bit longer. You mentioned integration. Integration is a almost like a contentious subject in some ways. Everybody has a opinion there. Everybody has like their opinion on what integration is and what integration isn't. So I'm curious to know, what do you classify as integration?
Yeah. Like I studied psychedelic assisted therapy, and they had this really beautiful little frame of we can change states. So maybe during the medicine, I'm in like a state of love that I don't normally have access to. I'm normally a really angry, hateful person potentially, but through integrating the medicine and the experience, does that become a trait change? I start to become a less angry person and a more loving person. So good integration would help create trait change, not just state change.
Mm.
And so in my practice, I just, like supporting the person to really reflect on what's different now. So it's not just let's just carry on with life and hope for the best. Like really, if we use that example of anger, what does it feel like now to just not have how's your body being held in a way that it didn't before? What's it like when you look people in the eye now? Maybe there's a part that was holding a lot of shame before that's really quietened down, and can we just really notice how does it feel to have that part not with so much shame being shown. And so we might then, with that ease and space in the system, we might be able to do some work that wasn't possible before. So we're just trying to really highlight the benefits and keep them going. Yeah.
Do you often find in the integration work that there's a sense of disappointment in people that nothing much has changed?
I haven't. Often there's like it's given, even if nothing really has shifted, it's given some really good information about what the next piece to work on is. I was working with a veteran some years ago, young guy, but He had PTSD after active service, and he had months after the psychedelic therapy that he was doing, where he would just feel totally different, and then he would kind of end up back in kind of his same stuck place. Yeah, there was some disappointment and frustration in that, but I think each time he did grow a little bit more, and I hear that he's doing really well now. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that sometimes the closing of a psychedelic ceremony um, is often not so much an end as it is a beginning.
Mhm.
In a sense, is that at least like in my experience of using psychedelics for personal growth, there has been some amazing things that have actually happened on the floor, of course, and then the integration has been bumpy. It's not like things shift
Hmm.
afterwards straight away. You're kind of almost like walking around, getting used to wearing new shoes, and at least like in my experience with ayahuasca, like it always blows my heart really open.
Um,
And when I was younger and using that medicine, I would get myself into um, situations that with my open heart, I would get myself into these like relationships, and they would
mm,
be then like it would be another set of initiations.
mm,
um, and I would often, like, back then I would be like, well, what this I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I shouldn't be feeling this heartbroken feeling, or I shouldn't be in this situation that's unrequited, or I shouldn't be doing this. Like, I've just been drinking this medicine. Like, I thought that I would be different now, but now, with hindsight and a bit more maturation, I realized that that is part of the integration.
mm,
For me, it has been like, yeah, just like a beginning in a new direction, and having to get used to walking that direction isn't always linear, or like doesn't go the way you want it always.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it is touching on something that's quite curious to me over the years, that we can have these bliss states, whether that's through medicine ceremonies, or if we think of really experienced meditators, or even
Mm,
leaders or gurus that reach these really heightened states of awareness, and even you could say enlightenment, and yet their parts haven't really caught up. They've sort of
mm,
ignored their parts. So we can see the teachers that we all know and hear about that have really abused power, or done harm to their um, students. But just because you can have these really high bliss states doesn't mean that your parts don't still need help and support. And that's, I think, what I really love about IFS is we're not ignoring the parts, we're helping them. We can go to the self and hopefully be more and more self-led in our lives, but not dismiss the impact that the life and the world has on parts of us.
In all of your work with IFS and psychedelics, working in rooms with couples, and I'm not sure we'll get a chance to talk about it today, but hopefully in the future, all of your deep dives into the world of Tantra and sexuality, what has all of that led you to believe about what God or source or creator might be?
I meditate each morning and just do kind of a who am I meditation, and um, it's just me. It's just love. It's just us. It's so hard to answer, but
It's a
yeah,
big question.
yeah, yeah. It's the clue of all existence, I believe. That's just love.
And then if you had to further describe the quality of love, how would you do that? How would you describe what love is?
Wow. It's just so hard to bring words. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. It just feels too limiting to really, like, there's nothing profound enough that I could really say. Like, maybe I could try and like read a poem or something, but
yeah,
like sort of any words then just minimize a little bit that
totally.
experience of um,
I mean, that's why art and artists are so
yeah,
important.
yeah,
It's so important
exactly.
to have them in society because they do the best possible job at describing what this thing is.
Yeah.
What God, what love, what intimacy, what belonging, what awareness, what these things are.
Yeah, it feels a disservice to even kind of try like anything way too limiting. I remember when I was like 15 or something, and I started to really kind of have a lot of kind of awakening kind of experiences. I thought I knew, like, if you had her on the podcast, you would get like a massive monologue. You know, she had so much conviction. I'll tell you, Paige. Bless, you know. But now it's just like, oh no, there's nothing that can be really said.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that because I resonate as well. It's like, even now there's still a part of me, or there's this version of me that is hell-bent on wanting to sound smart or certain. And the more smart, in my eyes, people that I get to talk to, the more I realize that it's actually the most intelligent thing you can do is be like, well, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure. And there's this difference between somebody that's like, I'm not sure because they can't be bothered, or they're like, that's a really deep question, and like it's impractical for me to spend time thinking about that, so I don't have an answer. And then the I don't know answer that comes from someone who really has spent time contemplating it, and years and hours of their life contemplating these big questions, but they're still just like, and I don't know.
I know what it feels like, you know, but I couldn't put words to it.
Yeah, that feels like a natural end to what has been a really incredible conversation, Ella. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry we didn't get to the Tantra stuff, but I would love to put that on the books for a future episode and dedicate the whole time to talking about your experiences. Diving into the world of Tantra and sacred sexuality. But for now, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can they find your work? Where can they keep up to date with what's happening in your world?
Yeah, on socials, it's Evolution of Intimacy. My website is just my name, ellashannon.com. And the podcast is called The Parts Party. And we ask all kind of leaders in IFS about their own experience of parts and self. So if people get curious about self energy, we ask it in every episode. And every person has answered a little bit differently. So...
Yes, I listened to many of those episodes in preparation for this conversation. It's a great podcast.
Oh, thanks, Paige.
Yeah, thank you so much for the work you do, Ella. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for the great questions and for the invite.